Alfred Tarfa, and it's my pleasure to be with you. And I hope that you have been having a wonderful week. Who has been having a wonderful week? Yeah, put your hand up. Oh, great. I am hoping that I'm not going to make you sleepy and start looking at your wife like, I don't want to go home. So what do you think you're expecting from me? Were you told what I was going to be, what I was going to talk on? Nope. So it's all a surprise. Oh, Mr. Lights went out. I was going to ask him for something. Anyway, when he comes back, I'll ask him. Anyway, so I was told to talk about Cameroon. And because Cameroon, we speak some French in Cameroon, and you're doing your French thing this week? Okay, so that's why I'm here. And I don't have a lot prepared for you, which means that I have a lot to say. Does that make sense? Which means that we can chase all the rabbits in this room, like chase rabbit trail, right? Know what I mean, right? Good. So, Cameroon. It's probable that you heard that word this morning. Did you hear it? Some of you did, some of you did not. And some of you remember, some of you do not remember. Okay, so let's start with some questions from you. I may not answer them right away, but they're going to give me a sense of what you expect. Anybody has a question except Zach? Okay, yes.
Are you from Cameroon?
Oh, that one. Yes, I am from Cameroon. What we're gonna measure. Let me see. There you go. I am from Cameroon, and Cameroon has, they call them regions now. It has 10 regions. We have the extreme north, the north, and down over the east, south, the center. Then you have the west, the littoral, the southwest, and the northwest. So I come from that region, northwest. Trying to see what I have some people that I can point like that's okay. So I come from that region of Cameroon. Yes?
Is what you're wearing the native clothes to Cameroon?
What I'm wearing is native or traditional wear for most of the people in that region. And all of this region, this is a traditional wear, including some of the western region. Somebody had their hand up somewhere. Let's go. Huh? Just you, okay. Another person has a question?
What's the population of your region?
I probably don't know the population of my region, but I know that this region, this section here like that section is English speaking, and they're about 20% of the total population, and then the rest of this is French speaking, about 80% of the population, and there are about between 27 and 30 million people. So if you add towards 20% of 30 million, mathematicians, yes. 6. So about 6 million. I'm going to trust this answer, or maybe let's calculate.
It's 1/5, so it's
20 or 1/5, so 30 divided by 6. Okay, by 5, 6. Okay, so mental math. I did that some years back, like 3 decades ago. Let me see what I wanted to say. Okay, you're not going to have a test afterwards, so feel free. You're actually going to remember more because you're not going to write a test. That's what happens. Have you ever noticed that in school? When you're really learning something just for learning it, you understand more of it, but when you're learning something to write a test, it's like you want to know everything, but everything is like, okay. Yes?
Did you travel much within or outside the country?
Did I travel much within or outside of the country? Just a tiny bit. I've traveled to this region, traveled to the center, but I've never really spent a long time either in the center or in the French region at all. So didn't travel much. Yes?
Does the country have like a large capital, or does each region have like a smaller capital?
So the country has a large capital called Yaoundé, which is this one right there. And each region has its regional capital. And they're fairly big cities. Like, I think Yaoundé is about 2 million. And then you have a coastal town here called Douala, which is almost like the economic center of Cameroon. It's about the same population, between 1.5 to about 2 million. If you want exact figures, you can Google it and find them. I didn't go to those details. Another person, if I come up, oh, okay, here.
How many miles across was your region?
How many miles? Oh, let me just say, okay, so there was a comparison map that I saw. It almost covers, like if you live in the East Coast, it will start from Georgia all the way up to Maine or something like that. Oh, it's like the size of California. The square footage. Oh, yeah,
Of
square miles. No. Yeah, of Cameroon is the size of California. That's how big it is, yeah. Yes, you still have a question.
How long can you like travel top to bottom?
It all depends. The routes are not as wonderful as routes here. Some of them are good, but national roads from one place to the other are not as good. Like, in fact, if you're going, let's see, like it's like I'm trying to convert it from miles to kilometers. It's about 40 kilometers per hour, which is like, yeah, like even going like what may be a freeway, maybe going like 30 miles per hour. So it's yeah, it takes a very short time, a long time to go to cover short distances because of the nature of the roads. Yes.
What's the most common way of transportation?
Common means of transportation intercity is minibuses. Like they will have buses here. There you will have a lot of them that travel between towns. And in the past 2 decades, or particularly the last decade, there's a lot of motorcycles. A lot of them. Like they're usually everywhere, like bees, everywhere. Huh? Yeah. So. Okay. Keep going. Unless it's boring, you can put your hand up and say, "This is boring." Okay.
What kind of government does Cameroon have?
Hmm?
What kind of government does Cameroon have?
Cameroon is supposed to be a constitutional republic.
Is that what we are? Sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar, but that's all that it is. Sounds like that. So La République du Cameroun, that's in French, that's the name in French. We're going to go into a little bit of history, and then it's also called the Republic of Cameroon, how the name came to that, what it went through. So it is a republic, it is a democracy, but it is a functional dictatorship. Does that make sense? Come on.
Yes.
Well, I'll touch on that a little bit as we cover a little bit of history. this time, Cameroon is in the top tier 5 countries of one of the most corrupt countries in the world. They've had that, like, it's everywhere. The government survives on corruption. Yes.
What are the main religions?
Main religions, how come that? I have a slide. Yes, sorry.
How old were you when you left there?
How old? You should know that.
I don't remember.
I left Cameroon when I was 29 years old. And I've been in America for about 23 years. So basically I try to calculate my age. That's fine. Okay, so I just noticed how old his dad is today. Okay, another person, any question? Yes. Oh, I'm
In the
happy.
winters, is it
We have a question from the back row. Yeah. Go ahead.
Is
Ask
it
the question.
cold during the winters?
We don't have winter in Cameroon. We have 2 main seasons.
Wait, 2?
Yes.
Dry season and rainy
The
season.
dry season and the rainy season.
Pretty sure
Yeah,
here.
I remember that.
And it's pretty even like. So this is June. Is it the 27th or the 28th? 28th of June today. So you have a dry season and a rainy season, and it looks like the dry season goes from about October to end of February, so about 5 months. And so the 7 months are rainy season. Typically, by the 25th of February, between the 25th of February and the 15th of March, that's when the rains start. Like, always, as I've grown up. So it starts around that time. The rains are light, very light, not very heavy, but there can be intermittent heavy rains. And then you go to April, they get a little heavier, then May, then June. By July and August, do you know how it's been raining the last weekend? Around July and August, that's how it rains, and even more than that. Torrential rain, and sometimes it could rain from when you get out of bed to when you go back to bed. It just rains, and the following day it just rains. And so those rains continue by September. They begin to, the rain starts going a little, and then by October, the dry season starts. And most of the roads most of the roads in the country are still, they're not tarred. What do you call it? Paved. They're not paved. So there is a lot of muddy roads, and you could take 3 hours from Fargo to Phillips Falls because the road is so muddy. And so we have just 2 seasons, and the temperature range or the vegetation in the southern region. I think it should be. Cameroon is more than 40% rainforest, so we have a lot of rainforest. In the southern region, more from here like this, all across like that, going south, is forest region. It's not that it's not inhabited, but it's rainforest with tall trees, mangroves, and all those that. And then you have what we call the savanna, which means the trees, but they're not very tall trees. And then you have this, from this section up, is very arid. You know the word, right? It's very dry. Because from here, you have the Sahara Desert. And so, in this region, this is Atlantic Ocean. So in this region, it is a little very humid and has high temperatures that fluctuate between 80s and 95 most of the time, and with maybe 70 to 90 or 95% humidity. So it's very uncomfortable there if you don't have air conditioning and things like that, which most people don't have. And then in the region where I come from, it's the best place in the world to be. It's up in the mountains, but more like a plateau. It's not like it's just mountains, but there's mountains. Like you can stand here and see Bismarck or all these places. I feel like I'm lost when I'm here in Chicago. You can see nothing, but there you can stand here and see hills across. And we're gonna see some of those pictures here. And the temperature around there fluctuates between, maybe if it gets really cold, maybe it's 58 Fahrenheit, but the average is like 65 to 70. Most places want to be. Okay, yes.
What did you think when you experienced your first winter?
Yeah.
That is
He's
my biggest
serious about
question.
that one.
I came here in September, and I landed in Chicago. I mean, the structure of American society is way different from the structure of Cameroonian society. It's like night and day. And I was in this area in Fergus Falls. That year, 1999, even by Christmas, there was not much snow. There was not much snow. And then, by the end of December that year, there was not much snow. I moved to Kentucky and I was there for 3.5 years. So I didn't experience my first winter here. I experienced it in Kentucky, and Kentucky is there's really not that much
Well, what
snow.
did you think of a real first North Dakota?
So the first time I really got the snow, I had lived here. I mean, a real winter, I had already lived here a little bit to know that, oh, it gets that cold. But I would rather be in North Dakota than in Florida, because I grew up with those average temperatures of 60 to 70. So when it's 80 and above, I'm miserable. 85 and above. I can tolerate up to 85, but from 90 and then, yeah, that's miserable. Yeah. So it was a shock, but I was mentally prepared because I had lived in the United States in another place before. Yes, any other question? So that's Cameroon. I'm going to explain to you. Let me see. I'm going to note that flag. It's green, red, yellow with one star in the middle. Note that. I'm going to come back to that. Feel free to stop at any time and ask a question. We're supposed to go till 3, so we're going to take a break after an hour. Okay, now you can locate Cameroon in the African map and in relation to the world. I made that up when we were traveling from here through France to the Cameroon some time ago. All around the world to Cameroon. So my next slide is a little bit of history, which I may be on that for the longest time, but I guess I have to make it a little, just not so much like, oh, I'm lecturing. Sometimes I tend to do that a lot. Now I'll ask you some questions. What is, what is coloniality?
Where's Tom?
What is colonialism? Or coloniality? How do you say it?
We really learned about this in history class, and I don't remember because I don't pay attention. So,
In history class? Okay, so So, have a colony. Oh, again, oh. Yes. You didn't hear what he said? So when you move from one geographic location and you go and you settle in another geographic location and take it over as yours, or establish whatever you want there for your own benefit, it is called colonialism. That's just a functional definition. It's called colonialism. And like he has given an example, I'll just go from there, which is probably something that you know. The pilgrims that came to America, they came to establish themselves here. And so they founded colonies, to colonize, to take over the place and settle as yours. So the history of Cameroon, as much of Africa, to a large extent, is wrapped up with the history of colonization, or the history of colonialism. And brief background, Africa has been settled for the longest, from time immemorial. Like studies show that the first humans were out of Africa. It even shows that the Garden of Eden, or part of the Garden of Eden, was in Africa. Remember Genesis 2? When it said that God planted a garden in the east, and 4 rivers flow out of there. One of it that went around the land of Ethiopia. So, but at that time, 400 years ago, even the continent of Africa was called Ethiopia. So, somewhere around here is the location of the Garden of Eden. So, there have always been some civilization there. And when you go back to your world geography or history, you learn about Egypt. This is Egypt. And the river Nile is right here, one of the cradles of human civilization. You may have learned about the pyramids. They were all the way from this used to be known as Upper Egypt, Lower Egypt. So here, the pyramids, they all began here. Who knows what an obelisk is? Yes.
One of those is like in Washington D.C., like George Washington's monument, like that super tall.
Yes, the Washington Monument is an obelisk. And do you know that those who started building those things were over here in Africa? Those things were back on top like that. The one that is at the Vatican, because there's one in the Vatican, the one that is in London, is the actual one that was transported from those places there. So there's always been life in Africa for the longest time. Or like you study the story of civilization. There was Africa, and then there was Babylon over here, or the Sumerians. That's as far back as our civilization goes. It goes back to Egypt, and then Ethiopia, or Kush area. So even in chapter 2 of the Bible, we have the story of Africa. But not as far as modern civilization. Because there was the ancient and then modern civilization. So even when you go in the Bible, in the book of Acts, I think it's Acts 8, we talk about the Ethiopian eunuch who had come from here to Jerusalem. I was reading the story of Isaiah 53, or the story of the crucifixion. So we're still talking about colonialism, and I said that the story of Cameroon or Africa is wrapped up back in that before. And in our modern era, I would jump all the way just to the modern era. 600 years ago in the 1400s is the same time that Europeans started settling in North America. Well, the first settlement in the United States was in what year? Is the question. When was the first settlement, or when was the first expedition? When did the first expedition land in Jamestown? Yes.
1607.
1607. There were 3 expeditions. You had Sarah Constant, Godspeed, and Godspeed and Discovery. They had landed here, not the same year. It was 1607, and the Pilgrims arrived in 1619. So before that time, in the 1400s, I think I have the dates like about 1405 or so, the Portuguese had started going around the continent of Africa to go to the east, India and so on, so that they can establish trade and bring home things. This is like the foundation of modern globalism, or modern civilization, or modern or international trade and so on. And so they began to, from Portugal, they sailed here, some of them were here, some of them were over here, and over here in Kenya, trying to go here. Then they began to capture people here and capture, they will round up people and steal their gold, basically, and bring it to India. And unfortunately, they also would get some of the natives and brought them over here to this area and sold them as slaves as early as the 1400s. Around 1405 or so. That's before. So they would do that, and then the Portuguese established a colony here where it's called now Angola. They had one in Mozambique, and then they started at that time. Spain and Portugal too began to colonize this section of the world. Brazil was a colony of Portugal, so was much of the rest of South America, Argentina is Spanish, Peru is Spanish, and Peru and all those. So the French began to colonize here. Florida was also colonized by the Spaniards. So they were in that business, the Portuguese and the Spaniards were in that business before the English started in 1607 to start to colonize America, and then they started the 13 colonies over there. So that was from the period of 1405 to about 1700. All of this was happening. And so the Portuguese brought a lot of African slaves over here. They started the business, and then they also established like all of this area. There were people who were bought as slaves and came to America, also from the Cameroon. So all of this area, people they traveled all the way like this and were brought here as slaves. I'm going to go into the story of slavery and coming, and so slavery was a very lucrative business. You had free labor. You didn't have to care for. I sometimes say that when you have the tractor, you take care of it, put oil, you put everything so it can function in the farm. Well, the slaves did not so. They were just basically used to death. Basically. And so so what happened is, we're going to get there. What happened is that slavery became very notorious, like it was back in everybody's eyes, and then that began to be at the abolition of slavery. of slavery in the 1800s. Oops. Trapped. Oh. So in the 1800s, we had those movements that wanted to abolish slave trade, and it all went up the way until in America we had a civil war. So all of this was growing up until when was the Civil War? When was the American Civil War?
18.
Not you again. No, another person. Oh, you know, stop. 18.
No, it was like the Civil War was like somewhere in your mid
18.
67.
Nope. I think it was 61 to 65. So we had all those abolition movements. And then it was like, we can't catch all these Africans and bring them here as the machinery for our industry. What are we going to do? The other thing that happened, which we're going to see at some point happen, was that, Africa was very rich in minerals. It was not only rich in personnel, but it was rich in minerals. It's still rich in minerals. It still has a ton of minerals, which is the problem in the world now. They all won't get it. So if we had abolition and we had English ships that were in the Atlantic Ocean trying to intercept ships that had slaves in them, the European powers were almost like Spain, Portugal, France, Germany, Italy, and France and Great Britain. They almost began to fight on Belgium, began to fight among themselves as to who will control what in Africa. So they were at the brink of war, and then one of the German chancellors, his name was Otto von Bismarck. He came up with the idea of a plan for colonization, and in 1884, that was 1884 to 85, they had a 3 months, I think it's about 3 months, approximately 3 months. They had a meeting in Berlin where they basically put the map of Africa in front of them and then divided it up among themselves. And then so it shifted from taking slaves to colonizing the continent. And I'm not going to go into the details there because, like all the independent African countries, most of them, I can say who colonized what, because the Portuguese had Mozambique over here in Angola, and they had something next to Cameroon here, and then the French ended up with having some partners, South Africa, Chad, Niger, Mali, Algeria, Libya, Morocco, all of this around here, and Cameroon, all of this. Oh, no, I went ahead of myself. At that time, the Germans had Cameroon, spelled with a K, and then they had Togo over here, and then they had Namibia. The English had Nigeria and all those places, and then the French had all that area. So in that 1884, they chopped up Africa, and then colonized is the word. You want to remember that word in your brain, colonization. It has a lot to do with how you can understand modern history. It's a history of colonization. Somebody, let's take a break there, not that you're going out. Someone, she wanted to ask a question. Anybody has a question before now? Before this time, there were empires in Africa. Some bigger, some smaller, and most of the tribal groups were functional democracy actually. They were better democracies than national democracies because you're going to have the ruler and you'll have his ruling council with, and then you will have hamlets or villages that have their own leadership and council. So the colonization scheme destabilized everything. It destabilized. They have no respect for the traditional customs or anything. It destabilized everything so that eyes were focused on the colonialists. So that was 1884 that the division occurred. At that time, the King of Belgium, Leopold of Belgium, had basically colonized this as his personal property. All this whole country was his personal property. I want to mention something about that one day. Maybe you will remember. Democratic Republic of Congo and Belgium, the King of Belgium, King Leopold of Belgium. He had very, 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 let's say it now, very brutal policies. They established rubber plantations, and the natives provided the free labor, and they had systems to make them work hard. If you did not meet your quota of rubber as determined for a day, they would take your relative or your child and cut off their arm so that you can see that this is serious and then do it more. It is estimated that under Leopold, more than 10 million Congolese were murdered, got killed by the Belgians. So it's a very bitter history. Just a Congo, I'm just mentioning that in particular. It was one land, it was one country, and that's what they did. So if you remember, have you learned about World War I anywhere? What do you remember about World War I? Anything?
It started off with assassination.
Okay. Of was it Austrian prince? Right? Austrian. Ferdinand. Something like that. Yep.
Oh no,
Oh. So we're not going into the details, but you have the nail, right? That's what is documented, that there was an assassination of this dude, Austrian prince, and then blah, 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 and then war. At that time, Germany was one of the strongest economies and strongest militaries in the world. And so the war was fought, and of course, Germany lost the war. And when Germany lost the war, he also lost our colonies in Africa, Namibia, Cameroon, and Togo. And the British, let me focus on the British were in Nigeria, and the French were in Chad and Central African Republic. So because the British and the French were those who fought against Germany, they divided up Cameroon into two. The French took the right hand side and the English took the other side. And what happened is that the English administered their territory, which was called a trusteeship, like given something to take care of. They administered their own section of the Cameroon from Nigeria, and then the French, they had this other side. So they had that trusteeship under the League of Nations that was founded in 1918 after the Treaty of Versailles and the end of the First World War. So that's how we had French influence there instead of German, and that's how we had English influence on the West. For instance, why I speak English, why I grew up with English, that's how it came about. And so in the 1950s, Africans were like, We don't want all this exploitation. We don't want all this colonial whatevers. So they wanted to be independent. And then, beginning from 1957, the countries of Africa began to be independent, or the regions. They were not countries then, began to be independent. The first was Ghana in 1957, and in 1960, quite many of those nations became independent, including Cameroon. But it was only the French section that became independent, and Nigeria became independent, and the English-speaking Cameroonians did not really. The history there is never conclusive, because the northern region of that section became part of Nigeria, and this southern region would have wanted to stay its own country, but the privilege was only given either to remain independent and be with Nigeria, or become independent by joining La République du Cameroon. That's why we had it. It was called, the Cameroon became independent as La République du Cameroon. And then the English speakers came in, and when they came in, let me read this. This will be the shot. So I said much of the area of present-day Cameroon was ruled. I want to go in short. I know this story in my head, and then I have to which one should I say? Much of the area present-day Cameroon was ruled by powerful chiefdoms. I mentioned that before becoming a German colony in 1884, known as Cameroon with a K, K-A-M-E-R-U-N. Cameroon. Oh, can you see from there? You're able to see that? After World War I, the territory was divided between France and the United Kingdom as League of Nations mandates. French Cameroon became independent in 1960 as the Republic of Cameroon, or La République du Cameroon. The following year, the southern portion of neighboring British Cameroon voted to merge with the new country to form the Federal Republic of Cameroon. That's how that country was called, Federal Republic. So it was a two-state country, Western Cameroon and Eastern Cameroon. So with statehood, they were basically independent. Like we have states in America, states are basically independent before the federal government. But in 1972, because the English were not well represented, the French began to manipulate things to basically assimilate the English speakers. One thing I did not mention about France's system of colonization, they have what they call the policy of assimilation, which means that they were saying that as we are part of you Cameroonians are French citizens abroad. Like, you are part of our empire. So the English speakers became assimilated, and the constitution was changed to replace the federal constitution. So no longer a federal government, but it was only a unitary state called the United Republic of Cameroon. At that time, this flag had 2 stars. United Republic of Cameroon from 1960 to 72 had 2 stars. When they changed the constitution, that was basically changed the constitution. And they have been changing it to suit political purposes. So the 1 star was dropped, and then they had only 1 unity star at that point. And then it became the United Republic of Cameroon. But the emergence has not worked well because it's an English system and a French system, and they're totally different. So with the assimilation of the English speakers, all we have is more French, like the French are dominant, and so they basically are occupying the English region because you could have a governor who is a French person in the English area. And so this has caused a lot of problem. They had only one party, and in 1992 there was multi-partism, then you have more than one party. And let me just go to the next slide here. So I put it here, outsider viewpoint. You know, those writing, looking at Cameroon and writing something. So the country has generally enjoyed stability. Yes, Cameroon has been one of the most peaceful countries in Africa. That is until 2016. Which has enabled the development of agricultural roads and railways as well as the petroleum industry. Nonetheless, since 2016, an Anglophone movement has emerged seeking greater autonomy. Remember, it was a federated state, which means that they had autonomy and could manage their own things, and that was taken away in 1972, and the union has not worked, so they are agitating and saying, no, we want to be autonomous or even to secede and become our own country, which they have styled Amazonia. So it is. So the English-speaking region now, that's how they have labeled themselves. They wanted autonomy, but the federal government did not give them, the central government did not give them autonomy, and they said, okay, we are going to secede. So from 2016, it was a demand for autonomy, and then in 2018, it was October 1st, 2018, they declared independence. And there has been continuous armed conflict, decimation of total towns and villages, and it's still going on now. In 1960, we had a president who ruled until 82, and there was kind of a peaceful coup d'etat. And the new president came in 1982, and he has been president since then. So he will be president for 41 years. That's why I say it's a republic, it's a constitutional republic with a functional dictatorship. Okay, so for this segment, I'll end it there, and then we'll come back and talk about just some general things, but some questions. I know you don't like, history is boring, isn't it? You want to sail to Cameroon? The boat, that one? You want to sail to Cameroon? Yes, any question? Any question about Cameroon? That's why there's an English side and there's a French side. And like the presenter this morning was saying how she showed you guys which sections of Africa speak French, which countries and so on. That's how part of Cameroon speaks French, another speaks English, and no country in Africa speaks German. Because the Germans were kicked out of there after the First World War. Yes.
I think the big builder and the paper down here.
It's not my paper. Ask him. So, who can, yes?
And I really liked all of it. It's fun.
Thank you.
And history.
Same here.
I'm not done yet, so.
Well, it's so fun.
Yeah. So, who can recite John 3:16 in English? Yes.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believeth in him shall not perish but have eternal life.
In French, it is car Dieu a tant aimé le monde, afin qu'il a donné son Fils unique. Quiconque lui soignait ne périsse, mais ait de la vie éternelle. Now, I'm going to surprise Brother Elias to say it to us in Portuguese, right? John 3:16.
Porque Deus amou o mundo de tal maneira que deu seu Filho unigênito, no fim de que todo aquele que nele crê não pereça, mas tenha vida eterna.
So, what I realized, I know French. And like he's speaking, there's words there that I can pick up because I know French. So I plan to, well, I actually was going to learn Spanish,
Oh,
and COVID came and stopped. I just started the classes in February and COVID came in March.
yeah.
And if I do Spanish, then I'll learn Portuguese too, because it's spoken in Africa. I think Spanish too in Tutoring and some places. So you hear that like in French, the word for world is monde, and then Portuguese is mundo. So it's like once if you know one and they speak, you're gonna know what is being said. So it's fun. I love languages. They're good. If you have an opportunity to learn another language, please do. Learn it. Question? We have 5 minutes. It will be 2 o'clock, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back. And then you did ask a question about religion. Then I'll go into that, and a few things about the economy and things like that. And I actually have, if you don't have a question, I just have a slideshow that may be relevant or not relevant. It's just that it concerns Cameroon. We went to Cameroon in 2017 as a family. So and I have a slideshow, and if I started and say, oh, that's not interesting, I'll respect it.
You know the picture of us cramming inside the one car?
Oh yeah, I hope I have it.
There's like 8 people in a 5-seater.
Yeah.
I think I sat on mom's lap and Isaiah and Carl were squished out in the seat. And you had Eden in the front and you on both sides or something like that.
Yeah. Yes, any question?
What type of car was it?
Small.
I think it was an SUV. Yeah. Yeah.
We used to have one of those. They are small.
You still have one.
Okay, any other question? Okay, so what time is it? We'll stand back at
It's 1:55.
1:55 with 10-minute break. Oh, there's a clock right there. Okay.